speaker is Professor Adam Cohen from the University of Toronto. Adam Cohen, the title of his talk is Imitator of the Old Law, Advocate of Revealed Grace, Visualizing Jews and Christians in 12th Century Regensburg. So we are now turning towards art history, and Adam Cohen is Associate Professor in the Department of the History of Art, and in this function he has also a great interest in Christian perceptions of art in general, essentially linking abstract theory and daily practice. This is one of the key words. Among his current projects are a book entitled Science and Wonder, 100 Haggadah Masterpieces, forthcoming later this year from Cohen Madrid, and a new introductory survey, Text, Art and Architecture of the Middle Ages, with Linda Safran. He is presently the editor of the Gesta, the biannual journal of the International Center of Medieval Art. Thank you.
Thank you, Ava, for that kind introduction. It is a real privilege to participate in this conference, and I'm very grateful to the organizers for including me. I want to thank them especially for putting me after Ahuba's terrific talk, which is a nice introduction to mine, and for putting me before Ephraim so that I actually have an audience. Thank you very much. The subject of my dissertation was an illuminated manuscript called the Uta Codex, which I will show you in a moment, and was made in Regensburg around the year 1025. And so for almost 30 years, I have been interested in the history and culture of medieval Regensburg. To be able now to learn so much from all of you about Judah Hasid and Sefer Hasidim is a remarkable opportunity and pleasure, especially because I have lately become more interested in the Jewish side of medieval history. I hope that the Christian material I present today will be useful for helping to situate Sefer Hasidim in context, and I will be eager to hear from you what might be pertinent from your own perspectives. When Judah Hasid came to Regensburg around 1095, he found himself in one of Central Europe's most intellectually vibrant Christian cities. As this map shows, there was no lack of important churches and Christian institutions clustered in and around the old city, built on the site of the ancient Roman legionaries' camp, indicated by the black rectangle. The map does not even show the myriad small parish churches and chapels. There were 3 regular churches staffed by canons: the Venerable Cathedral, the Carolingian Alta Capella, and the new 12th century foundation of St. John. And I trust you can all find things on a map. I won't take the time to point each and every one out. Also new in the 12th century was the Augustinian Church of St. Mang, just over the river in Stadt Amhof, and the Church of St. Egidian, belonging to the Teutonic Order, was founded probably in the first quarter of the 12th century. It was primarily among the monasteries, however, that we find the richest evidence of Regensburg's intellectual and cultural activities. The only one that retains part of the medieval facade visible to Judah is the so-called Schottenkirche, of which Ephraim just spoke, the monastery founded and populated by Irish monks in 1070. We see here the north portal of the church from 1110, but its decorative program with human and animal figures that probably represent good and evil has not been fully deciphered. The most important monastic foundation in Regensburg was St. Emmeram, which had been under imperial patronage since the Carolingian period, and by 1200 boasted one of Europe's largest libraries. I'm not showing you the monastic complex itself because it was rebuilt in the Baroque period and subsequently turned into the residence of the ennobled Thorn und Taxis family after 1810. Nor can I show you the medieval buildings of the 3 female monastic institutions in the city. Obermünster, which Google insists on calling the Parkhouse Bakersberg. That was not a medieval structure. At least as far as I know. Obermünster was destroyed in World War II. Mittelmünster, founded in the 10th century, is long gone. And Niedermünster, established in the 9th century, was reconstructed several times. Extensive archaeological excavations do provide a remarkable window into the pre-12th century past of the site, and make for a nice outing according to the Tourism Bureau. And it's true, it's a wonderful site. It was in one of these institutions around the year 1100 that the aristocratic nuns composed the so-called Regensburg songs, a remarkable collection of Latin love poetry that reveals the women's classical education and their connection to broader developing trends of European courtly love literature. Another demonstration of female literacy is Niedermünster's Uta Codex, one of the most complex theological manuscripts of the early 11th century. And from around 1180, this richly decorated necrology manuscript from Obermünster indicates not only the material resources of the foundation, but also the memorial function exercised by the nuns and their relationship to the local laypeople. Judah HaChassid would have lived in close proximity to these foundations. The map now shows the Jewish quarter and the site of the synagogue, which was first built at the beginning of the 12th century, reconstructed around 1210, and then destroyed with the expulsion of the Jews in 1519. It is recorded in these well-known engravings by Albrecht Altdorfer and is now marked by a monument outlining its plan in the plaza next to the Neupfarrkirche. The church was built as a Marian pilgrimage site over the former Jewish neighborhood. It is unlikely that Judah or any of the other Jews in Regensburg, who by the year 1200 probably numbered around 200, many of them Danube traders, had any connection to the city's female institutions. But we know that they certainly had interactions with their non-Jewish neighbors, including the monks. Between 1006 and 1028, a citizen named Rizamon donated to the monastery of St. Emmeram 3 courtyards in the Jewish quarter. Even though this is not evidence of direct contact between the Jews themselves and the abbey, it certainly indicates the close interweaving of Jewish and Christian lives in the Regensburg Altstadt, a fact that will come as no surprise to most of you. More compelling, although they postdate the time of Judah HaChassid, are 2 accounts regarding money lending. In 1257, the monastery of Prüfening, established on the outskirts of the city, to which I will return in a moment. The monastery of Prüfening was able to redeem the liturgical vessels it had sometime earlier pawned to the Jews for a loan. And in 1275, St. Emmeram received money against the security of a golden censer, a silver lamp, 2 vestments, and a mass book. We have, as we've been hearing, a good sense of Judah HaChassid's attitudes to his Christian and monastic neighbors from Sefer Hasidim. And I highlight items, especially from my perspective as a historian of material and visual culture. In short, Jews should not pretend to be Christians in dress, hair, or language. They should not use church music for their own hymns or teach Jewish tunes or language to Christians. Nor should a Jew use even the blank pages or the cover of a monastic book for a volume of Jewish texts. And vessels decorated with a cross or a human face should not be reused until the symbol has been removed. This last injunction appears twice in the printed editions, and I certainly don't have the expertise to determine what this means about the compilation of the texts and its transmission. I will leave that to you all, but it does make me wonder, like the account of the Prüfening and St. Emmeram loans, whether such overtly Christian objects frequently came into the hands of Regensburg's Jews. In any event, I think it is safe to say that Judah would not have been well disposed to the kinds of illuminated manuscripts being produced in Regensburg's monasteries. His predecessor, the great Ephraim of Regensburg, did allow textile with figural representations of animals to be used in the synagogue. This responsum was also included in the 13th century texts of the Maharam, mayor of Regensburg, who, in considering whether Jewish liturgical books could be decorated with figures, allowed that it is permitted, although he does not sound happy with the practice. Whether he would have approved of the Pentateuch illustrated in Regensburg in 1280, with its depiction of human figures, is a matter of debate. And I'll take the opportunity to point out the Purim scenes which Elliot Horowitz has written about so well, and take the opportunity to invoke his memory again. Even though this Chumash is later than the period of Judah HaChassid, I take the opportunity to show you the earliest extant evidence of Jewish visual culture in Regensburg. It will come as no surprise that the figural textiles described in the responsum of Rabbi Ephraim, which were used to decorate the reader's stand, do not survive. Such textiles were among the most precious objects in the Middle Ages, but they were also the most likely to suffer wear and be lost entirely. Some 12th century fragments preserved elsewhere give a sense of what that cloth might have looked like. And in the Uta Codex, we see the altar before Niedermünster's patron saint decorated with just such a textile. But other than Ephraim's mention of these textiles, we do not know anything about the decoration of either the 11th or 12th century synagogue. Altdorfer's later engraving suggests that this was a rather Spartan building, and the lack of any other responsa, such as that Effie Schoensteiner has recently discussed with regard to the 11th century synagogue in Cologne, suggests that this was the case, that it was relatively Spartan and unadorned. The same could not be said for Regensburg's churches, all of which would have been richly decorated. Only one, the Abbey Church of St. Georg in Prüfening, maintains a substantial amount of its medieval wall painting. And here we can begin to see how Regensburg's monastics visually constructed a view of Jews and Judaism. Painted in the 1120s, the extant sanctuary program is in large part a discourse on the Song of Songs, which was the subject of contemporary interpretation by the prolific Honorius Augustodinensis, at that time a monk in Regensburg's Schottenkirche. The program culminates in an imposing figure of Ecclesia as the Virgin Mary, bride of Christ in the heavenly Jerusalem. The walls of the central apse present a hierarchy of the church, surmounted on one side by 5 prophets, across from 5 martyrs. Both represent the pinnacle of human proximity to God. Lower down, on one of the piers, is an unusual representation of Luke chapter 22, verse 38. Quote, "The disciples said, 'Lord, behold, here are 2 swords.' And he said to them, 'It is enough.'" In short, trust me, in short, this is an allegory of the spiritual and political might of the church, a key matter in the ongoing investiture conflict between the papacy and the Holy Roman Emperor. That image is complemented by another pier fresco, another unusual representation of Moses flanked by Aaron and Hor. Taken together, the 2 images represent a fairly straightforward use of the kind of Old Testament, New Testament typology that had roots in early Christian art and theology and was rapidly developing across Europe throughout the 12th century. Much more interesting, I think, is a Prüfening manuscript securely dated to 1168. It is a complex book whose text mostly comprises the so-called Glossarium Solomonis, a text of around 900, 2 alphabetical glosses that can be thought of as a kind of dictionary encyclopedia. The manuscript opens with a suite of frontispiece images, of which these are only 3, informed by the writings of Honorius Augusto Venensis, a suite of images that constitutes a complex theological program about the human body as a universal microcosm, with pictures of cauterization procedures and the different anatomical systems. Most interesting for our purposes is this, I think, is this innovative diptych, a pair of facing pages whose main point, as the inscriptions at the top state, is to contrast animalistic sin and rational good. David, that's for you. Visually, the point is made through a series of mostly biblical contrasts. Glory is epitomized by the suicide of Shaul. Yeah, that's it. While the anointed David stands for humility, the patient Mordecai is the opposite of Haman's appetite for honor, and each gets his just reward, mida keneged mida. What I want to underscore here is that for the Benedictine monks who conceived and used this book, the Jewish Old Testament provided exemplars for both vices and virtues. This was not always the case. Here, for example, is a similar contrast. The colorful good tree, with leaves full of personified virtues, is associated with ecclesia, while the brown arbor mala is lifeless, a characteristic of desiccated synagogue. The ideological relationship between ecclesia and synagogue had a long history, including in the visual arts, and a particularly notable example can be found in Regensburg itself. The Uta Codex includes this image of what I call a symbolic crucifixion, because there is a lot going on in the page. But in brief, the composition is structured through a series of oppositions: life, the sun, and resurrection on Christ's right, while on his left are death, the moon, and the torn temple curtain. Ecclesia and synagogue take their customary places on the right and left of Christ, but there are 2 unusual features. The first is that the chalice that ecclesia often carries is here situated on her head. A clue to this oddity is provided by a later Regensburg manuscript, which was compiled during the exact years that Judah Hafasib lived in that city. Several folios in this miscellany include snippets of liturgical drama, and one even gives a series of instructions about appearance and costume. Philip, for example, should be young and with a black beard, while ecclesia, quote, should have a chalice on her head and appear honest. I don't know what it means to look honest, and this text of about 1200 may or may not indicate that already in 1025, when the Uta Codex was made, there was a liturgical performance whose details remained constant for almost 2 centuries. But at least it begins to make some sense of the strange iconography in the earlier manuscript. And for the later period, reveals that in the time of Judah Hafasib, there were liturgical dramas in Regensburg in which personifications of ecclesia and synagogue played a role. As for synagogue, the manuscript says, as for synagogue, the manuscript says that she should be dressed in black, her morose face covered, and holding a knife and the yoke of the law. Here too we get some sense of that from the earlier Uta Codex picture, where synagogue seems to hold a knife, signifying circumcision, and a scroll that symbolizes the yoke of the law. She is not dressed in black, however, nor is her face covered. although the figure's eyes are pointedly obscured by the frame. In her recent book, A Dark Mirror, Sarah Lipton has written cogently about the trope of Jewish vision and non-vision. Increasingly, over the course of the 11th and 12th century, Christian exegetes deployed the theme of Jewish blindness as a way both to characterize the relationship of Christians to Jews and to delineate internal Christian arguments about the proper role of images. The personification of synagoga in the Uta Codex is an early and potent example. An example that Lipton did not consider may be seen in another Regensburg manuscript, the last one I will consider today. It was made around 1175, either in Prüfening or Sankt Emmeram, and it is the unique surviving manuscript of a text called De Laudibus Sanctae Crucis, regarding praises of the Holy Cross. It has recently been ascribed, convincingly, to an author, an actual author, named Conrad, a monk of the Reformed monastery of Hirsau. Hirsau, as Talia reminded us last night, which is in Baden-Württemberg near modern Stuttgart, was itself founded by monks of St. Emmeram, and in turn was instrumental in the founding of St. George of Prüfening. So this was a very tight nexus of intellectual Benedictine monasteries. This book is best known for its sequence of typological episodes that extend over the first 9 pages, each seen with a red cross to make the point explicit. Here, for example, is the sacrifice of Isaac. The titulus reads, Isaac was offered and the ram was sacrificed. Christ died in the flesh, but conquered as the Godhead. This is a very straightforward typology. The less common scene just below is more interesting. Hagar and her thirsting son are shown the tree and the well by the angel. Synagogue, which is parched by the thirst of unbelief. It's true. Parched by the thirst of unbelief, is shown the wood of the cross and baptism by the angel of great counsel. But here too, the basic idea is consonant with traditional and contemporaneous exegesis. What is notable about these pictures is their number. With approximately 50 vignettes, this is the most extensive such visual series before the year 1200. It demonstrates an increasing desire to expand and systematize the typological connections between Judaism and Christianity. Other pictures in the book elaborate on this idea. This unique image is placed just before the text itself begins. As the summation of the preceding series, it expresses in word and image the union between Christ and the cross, which supported not only apostles and martyrs, all of them conveniently labeled for us, but also prophets and patriarchs. It is a grand statement about the essential unity of Jews and Christians gathered under the leafy boughs of the cross. The very last picture in the book also uses a botanical metaphor, emphasizing the generative and genealogical progression that stretches from Terach, Abraham's father, through myriad Old Testament figures before arriving at Christ at the apex. As a whole, the image is a variation on the so-called tree of Jesse, an iconographic motif that was becoming popular in the second half of the 12th century. But I know of no other tree of Terach. Nor is there an exact parallel for the two figures situated outside the frame, who thus act as witnesses to the tree inside. To Christ's right is a bareheaded and clean-shaven figure labeled Advocate of the Grace Revealed by Jesus Christ. In his hands is a scroll with a verse from the Gospel of John. For the law was given to Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. John 1:17. On the opposite side is a man with a beard and pointed cap, two signs that evolved in the 12th century as distinctive markers of Jewish identity. He is labeled imitator of the old law. I have not found any specific textual sources for these Latin phrases, and although the language is vaguely Augustinian, the ideas are so widespread as to make source hunting unnecessary. In its basic schematization, this pairing is very much in keeping with the earlier Uta Codex picture. Like Synagoga, the representative of the old law demonstrates his error by turning away from Jesus. It is difficult to make out what he is holding, but surely, like Synagoga's knife and scroll, it has a negative valence. Moreover, unlike the Christian who looks up and sees Christ, the Jew either does not or cannot. The most significant difference between the pictures of 1025 and 1175 is that the negative trope is represented not by two personifications, but by a more flesh and blood Christian and Jew. They are, of course, still types, the inspired Christian who sees and has a proper understanding of the scripture he holds, versus the morose, imitative Jew. But by rendering them in this way, the monastic artist has made the contrast more concrete and perhaps more relatable. In so doing, he was participating in a budding visual and ideological culture that increasingly sharpened the differences between real Christians and Jews, as Sarah Lipton has described. We should recognize, however, that the Regensburg images are far more benign than other contemporaneous images, which show the Jews as ugly and malevolent. Just 2 pages earlier, in the 1175 manuscript, is an unfinished sketch, which we might see as representing the outcome desired by the monastic artist. The Jew and Christian are still distinguished by their iconographic markers, including round-topped tablets of the law for the Jew and a gospel book in codex form for the Christian. But both figures receive their scriptures from Christ, and this time the Jew is on his favored right side. There had been a forced conversion of Regensburg's Jews in 1096, but that was overturned a year later by Emperor Henry IV. In 1182, 12 years before Judah Hasid came to Regensburg, Frederick Barbarossa confirmed the privileges of the city's Jews. And it does not seem that the Franciscans or Dominicans, who came to Regensburg in the decades following Judah Hasid's death, were particularly successful in winning converts. For Regensburg's Benedictine monastics of both sexes, looking at pictures in their theological treatises, the idea of Christ's status as the giver of scriptures would be accepted as a matter of faith. But the practical fulfillment of that idea, like this sketch, would remain incomplete. Thank you for your attention.
The floor is open for questions.
Don't all ask at once. Okay.
So now I think we will have to consider now how to put this obvious connection, but how to put this front and center in terms of what Hasid is experiencing and how it reflects itself in his writings. I don't know if you had any initial thoughts. It's okay.
Well, when I proposed the paper, I had hoped to do just that, but then I realized that I would need to become an expert in Yehuda Hasid, which I couldn't do, and that's why I want to be at the conference, because I'm hoping that over the course of these 3 days I will learn enough or communicate, dialogue enough with you all that we can do that work in tandem. Yeah. Yeah.
Just one idea that came to mind when I was looking at this, and I'm pointing to David, is the body of the microcosm in the Atan, which is really a recurring theme.
I'm sorry, the body of...
As the body of the microcosm of the universe.
Yes,
and the
yes.
idea of Atan, which is really well, not unique, but it is very special to that see. David's new forthcoming book contains Profanov, right?
Including that image from the Ruben manuscript.
So that would be a very clear connection between this kind of Regensburg Codex, which I'm sure you could find elsewhere in Europe. same time, but this is.
It's the earliest extant one.
Okay, so then that's even better. That would be a really nice
Yeah.
connection between the two.
The key here, I'm telling you all, and again, I don't know what door it will open, but I know the key is Honorius Augusto Venensis.
Yes, yes.
Right? He is with Rupert of Deutz, other than Hugh of St. Victor, who they kind of knew in Regensburg, but the two guys were Rupert of Deutz and really Honorius, who is down the street, right? And it has to be, and he's very prolific, and David's going to answer the question. I thought you were going to reveal all the things.
I have to save something so people buy the book. Just apropos Honorius, and this is just a bibliographic thing to throw on the fire, but Jeremy Cohen has shown that he has some pretty unique views, uniquely benign views about Jews in his writings about some of these issues. Maybe you would take issue with those.
Well, Michael Signer has suggested the opposite.
Okay, so we just have to work it out, I guess, not.
And Rupert's not so benign.
No, Rupert's a different story.
No, but sorry to interrupt, but I think this is an important methodological point. I mean, Honorius wrote a lot, and we shouldn't necessarily expect, going back to yesterday's conversation, that in a corpus over a lifetime, that everything should be consistent. People can have different views at different times, expressed in different contexts. When he's writing the Speculum Ecclesiae for preachers, that's, for clerics to preach, that's one thing. But when he's writing the Gemma Animae, which is a metaphysical Neoplatonic text, he could say other things. So, it's tricky to make categorical statements.
Yeah.
So please go ahead and make a categorical statement.
Not even going to go near it after that. And your point is well taken. Yeah.
I am again very sorry that I have to finish here. Just a small remark from my side.
Oh, please.
There's a coin being minted at the time of Sefer Hasidim, and it shows, let's say, Jewish hat, or a hat that is typical, a Jewish hat. And this will not be possible if, let's say, the connotation of being Jewish with the connection of money would have been so pejorative at the time, because the coin was minted in a form of competition with other coins, and these coins had to be conceived well with a positive value among the customers. And so we have here, let's say, a material culture that is very similar to the pictures that you have shown, and that actually also supports our notion that we have to be very careful and live locally with regard to perceptions of Jews. So just a little bit.